Okay, it just keeps going and getting better and better here. For our next treat here, we have a couple of Chicago chefs. Chicago is a great restaurant town, and we wanted to highlight some of the local talent and see what they're doing with whole grains. So we're bringing up two such local chefs, John Chiakulas and Greg Wade, and here to tell you a bit about each one and to engage our chefs in conversation is our moderator, Alexei Rudolf. Alexei runs a marketing and PR consultancy for restaurants called Foodservice Connections. As he says in his bio, though not a chef, he's proud to speak the language and wise enough to know he lacks the necessary chops, tats, and stamina to work in a kitchen. Alexei is here as part of the Barilla team, but I've known Alexei for years, and I was going to say he wears a lot of different hats. That is his Alexei hat that he is wearing this morning, not his Barilla hat. So he is going to introduce our two chefs and then get into a lively conversation with them. As soon as we have one more chair, or are you going to stand up?
I've got two chairs.
Okay,
I'm fine.
two chairs, two chefs. We're done. Okay.
Go ahead, Chef.
All right. Can everyone hear me? My microphone's on and everything? Yes? Good? All right, excellent. Yes, as Cynthia said, we're hoping this will be a fun and interactive conversation. I had the pleasure of chatting with these guys over the phone a couple weeks ago and in preparation for this, and there's all kinds of great things they have to share from two very different perspectives. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second, but we do, on our panel today, have both a baker and a chef, which I really like because there are two very different perspectives on this idea of whole grains in food service on the menu. Where can they go? What can we do with them today? What's working and what's not? Let's see. You already introduced me, so I guess I don't really need to say anything more about myself, and we'll focus on these two guys. In turn, I'll let you each introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and how you came to get there. John, why don't you start?
All right. My name is John Chiakulas. I'm originally from Chicago, and I work for Let Us Entertain You, and we're a little small mom and pop company. No, actually, we have quite a few restaurants, and I've been with them since 1981, cooking in Chicago at a bunch of different restaurants. My current title is Corporate Executive Chef, which means that I oversee about 8 or 10 restaurants that are in my division. Then I also work at the corporate office developing new concepts and helping with projects outside the company, consulting in different areas. So I kind of get to see quite a bit what goes on in the company. I started at Umbria, and I was at Avanzari back in the 80s, and then in the 90s I worked at Food Life and Wildfire, and went on to work at the Pump Room and be involved with Maggiano's and a bunch of consulting projects outside with Chili's and Gordon Biersch and Old Chicago. So I've done quite a bit of work with big companies as well, big restaurant groups as well.
Yeah, maybe we should explain a little bit. Let Us Entertain You is a bit of a unique proposition. There's not too many companies like it out there. There are restaurant groups in every city that have a bunch of different concepts, and there's sort of one parent that runs them all and has the operational savvy to bring them to a local market. But Lettuce is a little bit different and bigger than that. Not only are they incubating their own brands and coming up with things that fit Chicago, they're in multiple cities, and they also have a consulting arm that helps other restaurants figure out how to be more successful when they go to market.
Right.
Is that a succinct way to
currently, or most recently, I've been involved in the Beatrix restaurant. At Food Life, continue to be involved at Food Life, which is in Water Tower, and we have a bunch of different concepts there. One of them is Foodies, which is a market with a lot of grains. And then just most recently opened up EMA, which is a Mediterranean concept which incorporates some grains into their menu.
So I highly recommend you guys take all these down. When you have the time, hop downtown, take the train, however you need to get there, and do some scouting at both Let Us Entertain You places, and when we talk to Greg, we'll hear about some of his places too. They're fantastic. We're going to hear about it. It'll make you hungry, but then you need to go there and experience it, taste it, and you'll see how it's presented, how the menu comes across when you see it in person.
So that's brings us up to date.
Perfect. Greg, how about you?
Hi, so my name is Greg Blade. I run Publican Quality Bread here in Chicago. We are a wholesale bakery for the One Off Hospitality Group. One Off Hospitality is Publican, Publican Quality Meats, Blackbird, Avec, Nico, Big Star, Violet Hour, Doves. I think that's it. There's going to be a Publican Anchor now in Six Corners in Wicker Park. So we are a wholesale bakery when we focus on natural fermentation and featuring local farms, whole grains. So we get most of our grains from a farmer named Marty Travis and his son Will Travis at Spence Farms in Fairbury. It's about 2 hours south of here. And really kind of the interesting thing here is that we've got this really good relationship and dynamic between the baker and the farmer. And Marty actually mills all of the grains on his farm for me to my spec as well. So it's just kind of a pretty unique operation that we're really able to see what's going on in the field as it's growing. I go down there and visit pretty regularly. So we kind of see the correlation between what's happening in the field, and then we see how that plays out in the bakery. So it's kind of a pretty unique operation there. Right now we're supplying about 50 restaurants, including the Shaw's Crab House, which I believe is a lettuce.
Yeah, it is. We tried getting your bread. They said that you were no longer taking wholesale accounts.
That's changing this month. We right now that we're a relatively small bakery. We're all hand shaping everything. We're in a really kind of weird in between spot where we're not very small, but we're also not automated at all. So we're just trying to find the best way to grow properly. So we're doing about 50 restaurants, about 10,000 pounds of dough a week. I'm not sure if any of you are bakers. I don't know if that means anything to you or not, but for me, that's a fair amount of bread. So we're trying to put out as much whole grain things as possible, kind of for a number of different reasons. First and foremost being flavor. Second of all, supporting our local community and our local food shed with supporting Marty and Will and everybody. And we just think it's a really unique operation that we're trying to kind of push the industry forward as far as the bread baking scene here in Chicago.
John, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with whole grains and sort of how, over the course of your career, you've gotten more interested or less interested in sort of the fits and starts of that.
Well, one of the first experiences was at Food Life in the early 90s. I think we were a little bit ahead of our time. We had a kiosk. Food Life is a restaurant that has 13 little kiosks in it. So we have a taqueria, we have a little Chinese one, we have a grill, Italian, pasta. So we have a bunch of different kiosks, and we rotate some of the kiosks from time to time. We had one on wraps that didn't last very long, so it was a trendy one. But one kiosk was called Grains, and that was in the probably mid-90s, and it had a great location. And it just, we did paellas, we did healthy grains and different tabulis and things like that. And I think it would do much better today than it did, 20 years ago, something like that. So that was one of our first starts. And then that kiosk changed. We had a cooking light. So we dabbled in this kind of grains and healthful cooking, but it just never really took off until it did probably 5 or 10 years ago. It seemed like the whole grain scene and the health, the consumer is much more educated now than they were back then. And there's a lot more a variety of people who are looking for healthy food today. I find that in our restaurants. People are definitely looking for more whole grains. They're definitely looking for more information about what they're eating, where it came from. That's super important to a lot of consumers today.
And then in your position, you're trying to answer that need and give them not just the food, but also the information about.
Well, we try to give them as much information as we can. They typically want a lot of details about each recipe and, a lot of the nutritional information, and we just can't provide that for all of our items, so we kind of don't do it for any of them, really. So it's kind of hard now until we're forced to do it. In our retail outlets, we have to provide a nutritional label. So It's quite time consuming, to input all that into a database nutritional program. I'm sure you have to do it for certain retail products. That's part of the law. But for a restaurant, we don't have to do that. So we just don't have the resources to do that.
At the restaurant level, is it fair to say that it's a vocal minority that really wants all the detail, and by and large, the customer might be interested in whole grains, might be interested in finding healthier options? They don't want to know all the detail. They just want to see it there and be able to order it. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's very fair. For sure, it's a vocal minority, or very few people who are insistent upon more nutritional information. I know that the demand for the product is grown hugely. So whether it's foodies, where we have a market where we have a lot of salad bars, right? It's not just salad bars. We basically have a grain section there. We have to have at least 6 different grains every day. And some of them are legumes or lentils or things, but the demand for those products, we always have white and red quinoa and barley and certain types of lentils, and we'll have another grain, whether it's millet or farro, or just the demand is there for it. In addition to our prepared salads, which have a lot of grain components as well. So they're certainly buying them up.
Excellent. And Greg,
can I say something on that, actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I personally feel like it's, people want to go to a place like a one-off restaurant or a Let Us Entertain You restaurant because of the fact that, yes, they are being conscious about what they're eating, but they're more just trusting of this company and this brand. They know that when they go to Publican Quality Meats, they're going to get a pig that was raised humanely and not in a feedlot or something like that. They're buying more into the brand and into the reputation. And same thing with our bread and our grains. They may not know what they're actually looking for in a good bread, but they know that if they go to Publican Quality Meats and buy a loaf of our bread, they know that that's the best thing that we can possibly do because we're being reputable and we're trying to find, a farm grain, and we're trying to push the thing forward as a company and as a brand.
Yeah. They know your values, they trust your values, and so they're open to whatever you're going to provide them with that already understood.
Yeah.
I think that subject came up a little bit earlier today, this idea of sort of feel-good food. So it's food that makes me feel good because, A, I'm making a healthier choice for myself. Maybe I'm making a healthier choice for the planet as well. I can sort of pat myself on the back and give myself a good deed for the day in my food choices. Increasingly, really across the board demographically, this is what we want. It's simpler in a way than trying to read a label and count up numbers and how many grams of this. I just want to feel good about my food choice. And that's what programs like this do, which I think is what makes them so powerful and effective. Greg, you didn't share yet about your background with whole grains and kind of when you started getting into it.
Well, as a baker, whole grains are pretty important to me. It's something that's been kind of growing for a long time now, and I think that America right now is in a kind of a bread renaissance, a bread revolution, where you're seeing places like Tartine or Bianqui in New York or Bellegarde Bakery down in New Orleans, where it's whole grain focused. And kind of throughout the years, white bread has become, it was first off served to nobility way back when because it was lighter, fluffier, easier to eat, that sort of thing. But now we're kind of realizing that was a really terrible way to go. So for me, whole grains are important because one, it's flavor. We're partnering with a local farm because we're selecting these landrace wheat varieties for a number of different reasons, but for me, it's flavor. And then also because of that, these landrace wheats are part of a regenerative biodynamic farming system rather than it's not taking nutrients out of the soil. We're actually building nutrients back into the soil. So environment things are important there as well. And then as far as when we actually started using a whole lot of whole grains, I started off at Girl and the Goat, I think it's 6 years ago now, something like that. And Stephanie Iser, the chef there, was more interested in interesting flavors and combinations and things like that. So we were more of adding interesting garnishes and vegetables and and that sort of thing, instead of focusing on the grains. Once I moved over to the Publican brand, then I kind of took it upon myself to do natural fermentation and whole grain bread work. So I think it really kind of speaks to the skill and the craft of a baker to be able to take all of these different things and all these different grains and make them flavorful and tasty and nutritious. Using a whole grain bread and a whole kernel flour is much more important. And again, you're getting all those micronutrients in your bread. You're getting all of like the flavor properties that are really important for us. And then also supporting this regenerative farming system, which is, for at least myself, really important.
But there's no question that it is harder if you're not going to cheat and you're going to do it the natural way all the way through.
Yeah.
It takes more time, more effort, and more labor to do it.
Well, it's yes, more time. Definitely, we ferment our bread for about 60 hours. So I think that a lot of this gluten-free thing, this gluten intolerance thing, it's all of those additives that are in a flour, your bleaching agents or your enrichment or your dough conditioners or things like that. What we're doing is we're taking just a sifted white wheat flour and then blending in whole grains that have already been pre-fermented. So we're fermenting our whole grains for 30 hours before actually mixing it into bread. So you're getting starch breakdown, you're getting protein breakdown, you're getting enzyme activity, and you're also getting organic acids that make up the really good flavors and aroma of bread. It's one of those things that if you don't pre-ferment your flour, you're still going to have fine bread. But when you have a really great bread, it's all these organic acids that are making up all of that good stuff. So this long fermentation process actually is necessary for making bread out of these things, because it makes the bread more extensible, it makes it workable, which you don't have to do if you have these additives in your flour. But we don't want that, because that's what we think people are reacting poorly to. We've fed our bread to many people that say they're gluten intolerant or cannot have gluten, not because of celiacs, but for either life choices or just because of that's how they know their body, and they don't really have any problems. We haven't had a doctor come in and say that yet, but for the number of people that we fed it to and that come back to us and say, we had your bread and it was delicious for one, and for two, I didn't have any health complications. It's a pretty important thing for us. So it's just the wheat sifted, the whole grains, salt, water, our natural sourdough starter, and that's it. And that's working for us at least.
Yeah, and that's another advantage I think here is that clean label aspect. All the work that Greg puts in and that John is doing, it's all real food. It's all very simple. It's the technique and their skill that makes it come to life. I want to turn now to have you guys give a little bit of some of the examples of the standouts from your menus and from your bread rack, things that you're particularly proud of or that guests really respond to. And we can take that wherever you want to. John, why don't you start?
All right. Well, I'd say one of the menu items at Beatrix that's a standout is our quinoa cakes, and it sounds like a lot of people are using quinoa these days, but we've taken a classic item like eggs Benedict, and we make a quinoa cake Benedict, where we take white and red quinoa and form it into like a little disc. We add a little bit of egg and Parmesan cheese to it. We have to pre-cook the grains, and then make a little disc and sear those off, and we top it with poached eggs, a little bit of tomato sauce, and have our poached egg mayo, which is like a hollandaise sauce. And that's one of our breakfast items that's super popular. We also take those cakes and make smaller versions and top them with different things as an appetizer at dinner, and that rotates through our menu. You'll see quinoa cakes and so that'll go through seasonal changes.
So it's a really versatile base that you can use throughout
Right.
the year,
We've
throughout
done
day
it with
part.
roasted squash and cranberry vinaigrette, and then in certain times we have it with roasted peppers and currants and a little bit of cheese. Other times we've had it with tzatziki sauce, cucumbers. We always kind of keep it vegetarian, but so it's pretty versatile. So we've had all kinds of different flavor profiles going with that.
And I remember you told me about the difference between red and white quinoa, and you like to use them a little bit differently.
Well, I think so. I find the red quinoa kind of eats a little bit more like birdseed. It's very seedy and crunchy, and so we've actually we've fried it and made a crispy quinoa, and we've garnished that on like a seafood appetizer. We've had crunchy quinoa on that. The white quinoa is softer. I think it goes better in salads with dressings. One of our mainstays is what we call our superfood salad, which is kale, quinoa, almonds, cranberries, lemon, and olive oil. So it's like 7 superfoods in one salad, and that has become one of our most popular salads. We can't stop making it. It's on the menu at Beatrix. We also do it at Foodies in our salad bar, and that's super popular.
Is it still the case that you can put superfoods on pretty much anything and it'll sell?
Well, I mean, they'll try it once maybe, but it has to taste good enough for them to come back and try it again, right?
Right.
So the white quinoa I find is more versatile for different things. So salads, for cakes, for fillings. We did white quinoa stuffing, like a Thanksgiving sandwich with roast turkey with a quinoa, sage and cranberry stuffing. So that was, so it is pretty versatile in that regard.
Cool. One of the larger trends that I follow in other parts of my work is this. What's been happening is vegetables in particular are moving more to a main center part of the menu. See that in lots of places all over. The Publican is actually a fantastic example of this. 5-6 years ago, it was where you went for pork and more pork and then some oysters and beer. Mm-hmm. And today, there's a fantastic section, maybe the best section on the menu, right in the middle, and it's like 8 or 9 vegetable courses, where there might be a little bit of protein here and there. They're not vegetarian, but they're really making the vegetables, and in a lot of cases, the grains, the star. I know at EMA, you have a dedicated section that's grains and greens. Talk a little bit about that and how it works with your guest.
Well, we started the menu with it, so it was a good thing. We decided that we wanted more interesting salads, and we didn't want, because we have so many spreads and different appetizers on that menu, it's kind of like small plates, but Mediterranean style. We wanted we wanted to make the salads a little more substantial than just getting like a small plate of greens. In fact, we had a simple salad on the menu. It was the lowest seller by far. We took it off already. So now all the greens and grains have some component, whether it's a local basmati rice and black lentil salad, or our Mediterranean chopped salad has farro in it, or we have another one with quinoa. So it's just all over the board with these salads, and adding a unique grain, I think, makes them a little more desirable and a little bit more substantial.
Yeah. Greg, talk a little bit about the flavor combinations that you've really hit on on the bread side. When we talked on the phone, you mentioned a lot of the grains that you're working with have sort of natural partners that just bloom when they come together.
Well, yeah, so for us, being a whole grain bakery, we really just want the grains to shine through. So we're trying to do it very, very simple. There's good ways to treat separate grains. For us, we did a millet bread for a little while. And my normal kind of go-to method is that we'll take either whole or milled grains and mix it with water, and then let that sit at room temp for 24 or 30 hours, and that'll usually start fermenting naturally. If we get our local farm grains, they've still got the wild yeast and bacteria on the outside of it, so that'll start fermenting naturally. Now, a couple of these breads, we really found that millet just sucked the moisture out of the bread, even though it was like 85% hydrated. It just ended up with a dry bread. So what we started doing is cooking these grains before mixing them into our bread. So we were doing like a millet bread with some dried cherries and some fennel seed. That works out well. Millet for me doesn't have a whole ton of flavor, so complementing it with a little bit more of the tartness from the cherries and having a little bit of like that floral aspect from the fennel seed worked well.
Are you actually toasting the millet? You mentioned cooking it.
Yeah, we're like toasting it and then getting water on it until it's fully cooked. Let's see. Other than that, one of my favorite breads that we make is our dark rye. It's about 50% whole grain between cracked rye and rye flour. And what's kind of special here is that I think that most people, when they have a rye bread, they just associate it with either caraway or onion. So we just use 50% rye flour, and then that's it. That's like we want people to taste the rye. And when people have it, they're just so surprised because I don't think they ever really knew what rye tasted like. So really just trying to, they're not simple products, but we want them to appear simple. Like the method and the process is complicated and involved, but there's still only 4 or 5 ingredients.
How would you describe that natural flavor of rye?
Oh gosh, it's kind of like tangy, but like floral. It's just one of those things that when I open up the fermentation container, it just kind of hits you in the face, and it was eye-opening the first time that I smelled it. So if you guys ever have the chance, rye flour, 125% water by weight of the flour there, and then let that sit at room temp for 24 hours. Try to find a local farm whole rye flour if you can.
But Steven from the Bread Lab, if you're out there, maybe you can pick us up.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Other than that, we've been trying to do different honeys paired with these whole grains. Most recently, we've been doing an oat porridge bread. So we're getting a naturally hull-less oat from a farmer named Brian Severson. He's Marty's neighbor. What's kind of interesting here is that most of the time when you have an oat, you have to steam it to get the hull off. But this variety is naturally hull-less, so we can sprout it. We have a roller at the bakery. We can roll it if we feel like it. But these oats, when we first tried them, they've got like a little bit of cinnamon quality because of the way that they're grown. It was just super flavorful, but you're trying to find a product that complements that. So honey and oats obviously go together, but we're trying to figure out which honey. So clover worked well. That's kind of what we've been using there. Otherwise, we've been using buckwheat honey for some more of the deeper flavors. I don't know if you guys have done any honey tasting side by side, but it's really kind of remarkable if you have the chance. You can get little like 1-pound samples all across like Amazon or something like that. There's really kind of some cool stuff out there that I didn't know about until a few years ago. But right now we're doing an oat porridge bread. So cooking the oats again beforehand, and then making a pretty wet dough out of it with a little bit of honey in there. Really, the 2 main sellers that we have are our sourdough, which is a blend of wheat and rye. I do like blending the two in just a country sour. I think just kind of rounds it out a little bit more. And the other main seller is our multigrain. We call it 1979. I'll kind of give you a little bit of history there. When I was working at Girl and the Goat, I had an older gentleman working for me. He's probably 67 or so now. And I took him to Little Goat, and then I took him to Publican with me. Just a really, really nice little old man. And used to have a pizza shop here in Chicago. So he kind of just wanted to bake bread once he was getting up there and sold his pizza shop. We're sitting around and we're tasting the bread together. We'd always gotten along talking about like old hippie stuff and the Grateful Dead and that sort of thing. So we've got a fair amount of whimsy between the two of us. And we're standing around, and he's like, "Man, this tastes like nostalgia. This tastes like old memories." So we started thinking about, Super 8 film and fuzzy home movies and things like that. So I threw out the year 1979, and he said it was a great year. So I trusted him on it. I'm only 28, so I'm a little bit late to the party, but so it just kind of stuck. So what's kind of surprising is actually that our multigrain is one of the biggest sellers. Now, granted, we do try to sell that one. It's something that we want to sell. But kind of throughout my history, at least, when you hear multigrain, you're like, oh, good, gross. It's going to taste like cardboard. But that's definitely not the case if you're doing it properly. So what's actually kind of interesting is people are actually looking for that. It's really catching on that it's 5 grain, 5 seed, naturally leavened, and then honey. So I think it's a really kind of a good snapshot of what we're trying to do at the bakery. Very whole grain, multiple grains, naturally fermented with honey as our sweetener. So it's just kind of one of those things that I think that is really indicative of our program.
John, can you bridge off of that? What are you looking for? I know when we talked, you said, one of the things you've learned is to leave the bread making to the bakers, and you can let their expertise do the work, and you can get what you need and what you want. Are you looking across the many concepts that are under your umbrella? Are you looking more for whole grain and multi-grain options like that?
I'm glad after listening to Greg that he is doing the baking, because there's a lot more complex things going into bread making than I would have considered, all the fermentation process and the sourcing of the whole grain. So I'm thankful that you're doing that. Pretty soon we'll get to buy some bread from you too, right?
Yes, sir.
So my original question was, what are you looking for in a bread program, and also then on a related note on your menu in terms of
I still have to work with bakers and try to get them to develop certain breads for our needs. We did switch our breakfast toast to a whole grain because that's what the guest wanted. I know that there's a big difference between whole grain bread and whole wheat bread, and the consumer is getting aware of that. So we've switched to a whole grain toast, and for us that's 15, 20 loaves a day for breakfast, on the weekends, because we're very busy. We'll do about 700 or 800 customers for brunch on Saturday or on Sunday. So it's a big meal period for us. And for breakfast. As far as our sandwich breads, we'll use the whole wheat, but we also need like buns and different rolls for some of our sandwiches. So we've tried using those in the past, and we've kind of fell upon this classic sourdough ciabatta bun, and that seems to be what our guest wants for sandwiches. At Beatrix, we're one of the few places that offers our burgers on a whole wheat toast. And believe it or not, we're selling maybe 30 a day of people who are choosing to have their burger on whole wheat toast. Then we also offer gluten-free buns and bread as well. Because for our customer, I know you touched on it earlier, gluten-free items are still in high demand. Very, very frequently are we getting gluten-free requests for an item. So we have to prepare gluten-free menus in all of our concepts. And in some of our, like salad bars, we have to do gluten-free. We do GF. We do different tags if they're vegan, if they're vegetarian, they're dairy-free. And gluten-free is still the number one most special request of items.
Do you know about what percentage of the mix that adds up to?
It's probably at Beatrix and EMA, it's getting close to 10%.
Yeah.
It's that many of our guests that are asking for gluten-free items.
When you consider that around 1% actually have a medical need, that's a pretty stark difference, and shows you the demand power that's behind that. One of the things that came out in our conversations earlier was sort of that nexus of how interest in gluten-free also led to an expansion in what we were looking at in the whole grain cabinet. Going back to that first wave of gluten-free products that came on the market, actually very similar to the first wave of whole grain products. They were sort of rushed out there, not very well conceived or thought out, and frankly, not that good tasting. So folks like these gentlemen were like, well, that's terrible. I need something better. Where can I turn? And whole grains were a natural solution. They're already available. They have a great story behind them, ancient grains in particular.
Right.
That was really something you can run with in the kitchen or in the bakery. I'm probably getting close to question time. See if there's anything else I wanted to pull out. Maybe I'll turn it open to the audience and see how you guys do, and if you don't come up with questions, I will.
Yes, who has some questions for our chefs? Yes. Dave.
Greg, I was just wondering, when is the new Publican going to open in Six Corners? And yes,
Well, we were first told about 6 months ago, so hopefully any day now.
Oh, good. And
Yeah.
then, is the Publican at O'Hare Airport yours?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Publican Tavern at O'Hare is part of the One-Off Hospitality Group, and then the Publican Anchor, the one at Six Corners. I was told in October, and I'm not sure where they're at on construction quite yet, but it should be within the next month or so.
General rule of thumb with restaurant openings is you take the announced date and then add 6 to 9 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty,
And John, I'm unfamiliar with Beatrix. Where is that?
Really?
And how long has it been open?
We've been open about 3 years. The original one is in River North on the corner of Clark and Grand. Then we opened one in Streeterville. It is by Huron and St. Clair. It's right across from the True. It's in the Northwestern Hospital building. And then we're working on a third Beatrix. We're going to be neighbors with Publican. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
We're looking at this space right across from Publican and at the West Loop in that new building that they're building there.
That's great.
So,
Very cool.
I actually have a question myself. Greg, I was thinking of this while you were talking about your 60-hour ferment and so forth. Although I'm not aware of any scientific evidence that really proves it, I think a lot of people are saying the same thing about longer ferments really make these products more available to people who may have digestive issues other than celiac with certain foods. So how does the commercial baker, and this maybe plays into what you're saying about, how do we grow beyond this point? How can the commercial bakers that are in this room learn anything from what you've seen about fermenting? Is it possible for that kind of baker to actually implement some of these techniques?
Well, I've never run a commercial bakery, so I'm not 100% familiar with their entire process. I would think that there is a way to be able to do that for them. Really what makes a bakery effective is being able to put out a large number of things quickly. So really I think that if we were able to set aside a designated area to pre-ferment some of these things, because it's very hands-off, the process. I mean, really all you're doing is mixing your grains in water and then you just let it sit somewhere. So if there is space to be able to allow your grains to start fermenting naturally, that's a good way to start. And then I guess I'm not 100% because the machines that are used in a commercial bakery, they're used for much drier doughs than I'm used to. I've tried a couple of them and they just don't really work with how sticky and tacky it gets. So I think that there definitely is room for incorporating this sort of thing. I think that at the very least, if you source your flours from a reputable source and make sure that there's no additives or enrichments or things like that, that's a good place to start. Because even if you're just subbing one for one a farm grain for a commodity grain, you will notice a flavor difference. And then obviously have a better impact on your environment and local food shed and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. They just set that area aside for fermenting. I actually visited a traditional rye bakery in Denmark when I was there speaking once, and they did a process. They said, this is 100% rye bread, and I'm thinking, okay, they use 100% rye flour. No, they mean 100% rye, as in rye berries. They ferment the rye berries for 48 hours in a commercial bakery, and somehow they get soft enough. So the only flour they use is actually in the sourdough starter, and the rest of that is soaked rye berries. So maybe I've answered my own question that this is possible. Do we have any input from a baker here?
Hi, I'm Paul LeBeau from Wolfgang Mock in Germany. I'm not a baker, and I'm also not a scientist, but I'm carrying around with me a PDF that was sent to me by a scientist just recently from an article that was published in the Journal of Functional Foods at mid-year this year. And the headline is Wheat and Irritable Bowel Syndrome, FODMAP Levels of Modern Ancient Species and Their Retention During Bread Making. And FODMAPs, somebody here can tell me what they really are. What are they? Fermented oleo dye and monosaccharides, so you guys can explain to me what those are. But the fact is that they are being looked at, I think, everywhere in the literature as possibly the real problem versus gluten. And what they show here is that by the time you get down to 4 to 6 hours of fermentation, basically all all of the fructans and all of the excess fructose is gone. And so that long-term fermentation you're doing, and there you're exactly right. And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to share the reference on that paper. I think it's worth reading. If it's
I would definitely like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Very helpful. Yeah, Colleen?
I'm kind of setting up my own session for tomorrow, which is talking to culinary educators around the country. And so my question for you is, both of you, are you finding that the cooks and the bakers that are coming to you from the workforce, are they well versed in whole grains? Do they know what to do with them yet, aside from what you're asking them to do?
Would you go first?
I would say for me, not that much. So we're getting cooks who, we're not getting cooks who are really educated in whole grains. And if we're lucky enough to find a baker, that we can hire, then also they probably wouldn't have a lot of experience in whole grains. So maybe you're doing better.
And you would like it if they did?
Yes, actually, I would second that. In my pretty short tenure as a manager, compared to some of the people here, I still have not found a trained baker ready to hire. Nobody really knows bread making in an artisan level. There is tons of interest. There's sometimes that we're having a stage every day a week. Stage is a free kitchen. They're coming in just to work in the kitchen for the day. So we have a lot of interest, but nobody really knows what they're doing. It kind of goes back to what I was saying as far as people coming to us as a brand. They know that this is the way that bread is going to be in the near future, kind of more ubiquitously, but they don't know how to get there. So they know that they should come to somebody like myself, but they don't know how to make bread, no.
Anything else from the audience? Yes.
So I want to, and maybe you do both. Are you soaking the flour overnight, the ground flour, or the whole grains, or sometimes both, depending on what you're making?
Well, most of the breads are going to be a blend of white bread flour and then whole grains. So what I'm doing is taking the whole grains and soaking them with equal part water, or 125% water if it's a rye bread, and letting that ferment naturally. And then the next day I'll mix in my more white flour, my sourdough starter, and then create my final mix from there.
Okay.
The question is, are you using whole grains or whole grain flour?
Yeah, what you're soaking overnight, are you using the milled flour and wetting the flour and soaking that and letting it sit and ferment, or are you...
It depends on the bread.
Okay, that's what...
Sometimes it's flour, sometimes it's a cracked grain, sometimes it's a whole grain.
Okay.
Yep, just kind of depends on how much texture you want and how much work you want to put into it.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't bring the photos. I had a few, but I didn't have enough to do a rolling slideshow. You would have seen big vats of what looks like porridge just sitting there bubbling away. That's the fermentation going on.
That would have been very cool, yeah. Okay, we'll just imagine that anyway. Well, thank you very much to our chefs. That was a very eye-opening and interesting session. Before we break for lunch, which we're going to do in just a minute, I do want to talk to you. We will be heading over for our lunch, but I want to draw attention. I've seen many of you visiting our sponsor tables already. I want to just say this is not like pop-up ads on the internet where you want to avoid the advertisements because they have nothing to do with what you're really looking for. The expertise in the next room is part of this conference. I got my eyes open to this. I think it was back in 2005. I had only been running the Whole Grains Council for a couple of years, and one of the companies that we were working with at the time said, we are developing a new bun for a fast food restaurant chain. Do you want to come down to New Jersey and help us? They wanted me to talk to the headquarters of this company and tell them about all the reasons why they should go with whole grain. And in exchange, I got to sit around in one of their franchises, and we baked off like 5 different versions of this whole grain bun during the day. And I'm going, wow, companies do this? They just, develop 5 different buns, and they go and bring somebody in to talk to the company and convince them whole grains is important. And I was really impressed. And then shortly thereafter, I started making the acquaintance of the In Harvest folks. You've heard them referred to several times because they do go around all the place and just say, here's how you cook these things. And this is the sort of things that companies need to do. I have been to Bay State Milling's Innovation Center because they're neighbors of ours near Boston, and seeing the sort of things they do to support their customers. And when we were planning this conference, this was something that we wanted to be part of it, to say, hey, if I don't know how to add this stuff to my menu, I don't have to figure it out. These guys can help me figure it out. So we've added a little extra time to lunch today. We want you to have plenty of time for lunch and networking. So you have an hour for that, and then that last half hour especially is a little extra time so that you will have time to really find out what kind of solutions are available to help you in whatever you're doing in food service. And we hope you'll take advantage of that. But first, have a wonderful, wonderful meal, and we will see you back here at 1:30. Thank you.